If there were chariots found in the Red Sea, it would probably have something to do with the crossing of the sea.
There is a battlefield at the bottom of the Red Sea. We're not talking about a single shipwreck. We're talking about an entire Egyptian army. A recent high-tech dive has just uncovered what amateur explorers have claimed for years. Hundreds of chariot wheels, horse skeletons, and human remains perfectly preserved in coral.
Is there any physical evidence on the seabed? Yes, there is. And we have some examples. Skeletons of humans, skeleton parts of horses and bulls, chariot wheels.
This finding doesn't just support an ancient story, it threatens to rewrite it. And get this, Egyptologists are completely silent. The implications of this find are staggering, and the story behind it is even crazier. The $10 million secret. So here's the deal. In late 2024, a small, highly secretive team of divers, engineers, and underwater archaeologists launched a private expedition. This wasn't a university-funded project you read about in a boring journal. This was a quiet, covert operation funded by private backers to the tune of over $10 million. They were equipped with technology that most archaeological teams can only dream of. Advanced side-scan sonar, military-grade remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, with high-definition 4K cameras and hypersensitive magnetometers. They weren't just looking for old pots or a stray anchor, they were looking for something specific. Something that mainstream science insisted did not exist. They were looking for the lost army of the Pharaoh. For decades, rumors and amateur reports had pointed to a very specific spot in the Red Sea's Gulf of Aqaba. The stories, often dismissed as fantasy, told of coral-encrusted chariot wheels, scattered bones, and the physical remnants of the Egyptian army from the biblical Exodus. For just as long, mainstream Egyptology and archaeology had laughed off these claims. They called it pseudoscience, a religious hoax, and wishful thinking. But this new team had a map. It was a map based on those old, ridiculed claims, and they had the technology to see what no one else could, or perhaps what no one else wanted to see. They started their search in a wide grid. For days, the sonar pulsed into the deep, scanning the seabed. Then the sonar operator saw it. Strange, symmetrical anomalies on his screen. These shapes were not natural rock formations. They were round, precise, and most chillingly, they were arranged in a long, linear trail. The team was stunned. The shapes looked exactly like wheels, hundreds of them. They deployed the ROV, a small submarine robot, sending it down into the dark, cold water hundreds of feet below the surface. The sub's high-powered lights cut through the gloom. At first, there was nothing but sand and rock, and then suddenly there it was, emerging from the sand, a perfectly round shape, completely covered in coral. It was, without a doubt, a wheel, an ancient spoked chariot wheel. As the ROV glided forward, its robotic arm brushing away the silt, another came into view, and another, and another. It was a debris field, a massive one. The site stretched for nearly a mile and a half. This was it. The team knew they had to go down themselves. This was too big to just observe through a camera. Elite deep-sea divers, many of them ex-military, prepared for a difficult and dangerous dive. As they descended into the silent deep, the sheer scale of the cataclysm became terrifyingly clear. This was not a single shipwreck. This was a military catastrophe, frozen in time. The seafloor was a war zone. It was littered with the remains of a fleeing or perhaps charging army. They saw wheels with 4 spokes, 6 spokes, and even 8 spokes. This detail is a massive wow factor. Why? Because these specific designs match perfectly the different types of chariots used by the Egyptian army during the New Kingdom period. The 4-spoked wheels were older, but the 6 and 8-spoked wheels were the new, high-tech, stable designs used by elite warriors and the Pharaoh himself. Finding them all jumbled together was a snapshot of the entire Egyptian chariot corps. But it wasn't just wheels. They found twisted metal fragments that looked like axles. They found what appeared to be the tangled, rectangular remains of the chariot cabs themselves, now just piles of corroded bronze and petrified wood, all fused to the seafloor by centuries of relentless coral growth. What most people don't realize is that the divers reported an overwhelming, eerie feeling of dread. They were swimming through an underwater graveyard. And then they found the bones. Tangled within the chariot debris, just as the old reports had claimed, were bone shards. Hundreds, possibly thousands of them. Some were clearly animal, the skulls, ribs, and femurs of horses, exactly where they would be if they were still harnessed to the chariots. But others were unmistakably human. Spines, pelvic bones, and fragments of skulls all mixed together in a chaotic, terrible jumble. This wasn't just an equipment dump. This was the final, watery resting place of hundreds, maybe thousands, of elite soldiers and their animals who all perished in a single, sudden, and violent event. The crazy part? One of the divers, sweeping a high-powered light over a mound of coral, caught a faint, unnatural glimmer. Beneath the crust, something was shining, a dull, unmistakable golden sheen. This matched the most incredible, most dismissed claim of all, that among the army's wreckage was a single gold-plated chariot wheel, perhaps belonging to a high-ranking general or even the Pharaoh. They couldn't touch it. The coral had locked it in place. To try and remove it would be to destroy it. The team documented everything. They took thousands of high-resolution photos and hours of high-definition video. They knew what they had found would send shockwaves through the world. They had found physical, tangible evidence that seemed to support one of the oldest and most foundational stories in human history. But here's the catch. This discovery, as monumental as it was, also opened up a massive can of worms. It challenged everything mainstream Egyptology had taught for the last 100 years. And that is why, when the initial findings were quietly shared with certain academics and institutions, the reaction was not excitement. It was silence. A cold, hard, frozen silence. But the discovery was just the first piece. The location was the second. A bridge at the bottom of the sea. So why this exact spot? What's so special about this random patch of the Gulf of Aqaba? Yeah, about that. This is where the story gets even more incredible. The location of the dive was not random. It was chosen because it's one of the most unique and bizarre underwater features on the entire planet. The Gulf of Aqaba, which separates the Sinai Peninsula from modern-day Saudi Arabia, is known for being extremely deep. We're talking about a massive underwater canyon that in most places plunges down to 5,000 or even 6,000 feet. That's over a mile straight down. It is a massive, impassable trench. Trying to cross it with an army of chariots or even on foot would be completely impossible. It is a sheer cliff of dark water, except for one very specific place. Right where the divers found the army, there is a massive flat land bridge that spans the entire Gulf. It's an underwater plateau stretching nearly 10 miles from the shore of a massive beach in Egypt called Nuweiba to the shore of Saudi Arabia. And get this, on either side of this bridge, the seabed plunges dramatically into those 5,000-foot deep abysses. But the bridge itself, it's relatively shallow. Now, shallow is a relative term. It's still about 900 feet deep at its deepest point. But compared to the mile-deep canyons on either side, it is a raised pathway. The sonar maps show it clearly, a distinct, massive underwater road 10 miles long and several miles wide. This underwater pathway is the only place in the entire 100-mile length of the Gulf of Aqaba that an ancient group of people could have even attempted to cross. What most people don't realize is that this geographical feature is a perfect one-to-one match for the ancient story. The biblical account describes the fleeing Israelites being trapped against the sea with mountains on either side and the Pharaoh's army closing in. The location at Nuweiba Beach is a perfect fit. It's a massive, sprawling beach, but it's completely walled in on either side by steep, impassable mountains. The only way in is from the west, and the only way out is forward into the sea, and right there at that exact spot is the underwater bridge. This geography is a massive wow factor because it's a detail that ancient writers could not possibly have known about. You can't see it from the surface. You can only find it with advanced sonar. Yet the story they told points directly to this one-of-a-kind location. The geography itself acts as a massive, silent piece of evidence, suggesting that something historic and catastrophic happened right here. A corridor can also be a trap. The linear distribution of the artifacts, the mile-and-a-half-long trail of wheels and bones, follows the path of this submerged bridge. It looks exactly like a group that was caught in the middle of the passage. This location also explains why the artifacts are still there. The 900-foot depth protected them from storms, ship anchors, and looters for millennia. And the unique currents created by the deep canyons on either side have trapped silt and sediment on the plateau. This sediment slowly buried the artifacts, and of course the warm, clear water is perfect for coral growth. The coral has acted like a natural concrete. It grew on the hard, solid surfaces of the chariots, the wood, the bronze, the leather. Over thousands of years, the wood rotted away and the metal corroded, but the coral held its shape. The divers weren't just finding wheels, they were finding wheel-shaped coral. They are essentially fossils of chariots. Without this specific geography and biology, any remnants would have been scattered and dissolved into nothing centuries ago. This land bridge, this perfect crossing, also explains the scale of the find. An entire army with hundreds of chariots, horses, and soldiers forced into this narrow 10-mile bottleneck would be completely and totally vulnerable. When the disaster struck, there was no escape. They couldn't go left. They couldn't go right. They were trapped. This tragic bottleneck explains the massive concentration of artifacts. It's a silent underwater testament to a cataclysmic event. The fact that this terrain is so unique also helps debunk one of the main skeptical arguments. Critics often say, oh, it's just a random shipwreck. But here's the deal. This isn't a shipwreck. It's hundreds of military chariots, all from the same time period, all found in a linear path on the only plausible land crossing in the entire Gulf. That's not a coincidence. That's a scene. This unique path wasn't found by accident. One man claimed it was there all along. The vindication of a madman? This entire incredible story, the secret expedition, the sonar maps, the frozen Egyptologists, it all goes back to one man. A man who was not a professor, not a famous archaeologist, and not part of the academic elite. His name was Ron Wyatt, and for decades, the entire world thought he was a complete crank. So here's the deal with Ron Wyatt. He was a nurse anesthetist from Tennessee. He was also a passionate, deeply religious, self-taught biblical adventurer. Driven by an unshakable, literal belief that the stories in the Bible were physical, locatable history, he spent his life and his own money trying to find the physical proof. He was the definition of an amateur, an outsider, and that's putting it lightly. In the 1970s, Wyatt became obsessed with finding the true Red Sea crossing. He dismissed the traditional Reed Sea theories, small, marshy lakes in northern Egypt. He followed the biblical clues, which he believed pointed to a massive body of water deep enough to drown an army. His search led him to the Gulf of Aqaba, and specifically to the massive mountain-locked beach of Nuweiba. He reasoned with simple logic that if this was the spot where the Israelites were trapped, then this must be the spot where the sea parted. And if that was true, then the remains of Pharaoh's army must be at the bottom of the Gulf, right on that underwater land bridge. So in 1978, armed with basic scuba gear, a small boat, and a lot of faith, he did something no one else had bothered to do. He dived down. What he claimed to find was exactly what the new $10 million expedition just verified. He reported seeing coral-encrusted chariot wheels. He even claimed to have recovered a hub from one. He took blurry, grainy underwater photos, which were easy to dismiss as interestingly shaped coral. But he didn't stop there. On later dives, he claimed to have found more. He reported finding human bones and horse bones, all mixed in with the chariot parts. And he made his most explosive claim of all. He said he had found and filmed the legendary golden chariot wheel gleaming faintly beneath the coral. When Ron Wyatt presented his findings, the academic world didn't just ignore him. They ridiculed him. They tore him apart. He was labeled a fraud, a pseudoscience peddler, and a religious zealot who was just seeing what he wanted to see. Egyptologists and archaeologists were frozen in a state of complete and total dismissal. And get this, Wyatt's other claims made him an even bigger target. He also claimed to have found Noah's Ark, the true location of Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia right across from Nuweiba, the ashes of the red heifer, and even most fantastically the Ark of the Covenant, hidden in a cave under Jerusalem. To the mainstream scientific community, this wasn't research. It was a fantasy-fueled treasure hunt. His Red Sea claims were thrown out along with everything else. For over 40 years, the site was dismissed as a myth, a conspiracy, and nothing but coral and wishful thinking. But here's the catch. Ron Wyatt passed away in 1999, his claims still almost universally mocked. But he left behind his research, he left his maps, he left the exact coordinates of the underwater land bridge and the debris field he had found. The secret high-tech expedition in 2024? They weren't diving blind, they were following Ron Wyatt's map, and their $10 million sonar and high-definition cameras were verifying one by one the impossible claims that the nurse from Tennessee had been making all along. The sonar confirmed the land bridge, the ROVs confirmed the wheels, the 4, 6, and 8-spoked wheels, just as he said. The divers confirmed the bones, and they even saw the glint of gold that Wyatt had reported. This is the core of the controversy. The experts who dismissed Wyatt for decades are now faced with high-tech data that proves he was, at the very least, right about the existence of a massive, ancient underwater debris field.